A very warm welcome to our HOD ma'am, Professor Zeba Akil. Today's speaker, Dr. Anshul Ali Tiger. My name is Dr. Pallavi, Assistant Professor of History, Department of Humanities and Social Sciences, Integral University, Lucknow. Our today's speaker, as we know, is Dr. Anshul Ali Tiger, and he is very expert. He's expertise on history, and the today's topic is Mauryan history. And in the earlier video, he taught us about the decline phase of Mauryan history. So now he extended the topic. So please, sir, you can proceed now.
Thank you, Dr. Pallavi. So, today's uh, topic is Ashoka and uh, and the decline of the Mauryas, or the decline of the Mauryas after the Ashoka. So, one of the major reason for the decline of was the succession of the weak kings and after the Ashoka. So, we all know that after the Ashoka, there are many rulers in the Mauryan dynasty who were weak in the terms, and they did not control the entire empire in a very good manner. That's why this became the reason for the decline of the Mauryas in the Indian subcontinent. So another a further and immediate cause, if we go through the immediate cause for the decline of the Mauryas, was the partition of the empire into the two. So the eastern part under the Dasarath and the western part under the Kunal. Had the partition not taken place, the Greek invasion of the northwest could have been held back for a while, giving the Mauryas a chance to reestablish some degree of their previous power. So the partition of the entire empire disrupted the various services as well as, and the political and the administrative organization had been planned by the first three Mauryas in such a way that uh, it consisted a strict supervision from the centers and radiating to a network throughout the empire. So after the partition, the eastern half was an advantage since Patliputra and the organization at the Patliputra continued much as before, although a smaller scale. So the western half had to rapidly expand the provincial government of the Takshila and the northwest province into a near imperial organizations. In this process of change, it was unable to give full attention to the Greek attacks on the Mauryan Empire. And also the quality of the king who followed Ashoka was, in contrast to his own, was very doubtful. So the pattern of the Ashoka's policy was not a conventional one. This was in the part due to the new imperialism of the Mauryas, uh, and in part of the Ashoka's ideology which dominated his government. So it naturally created a problem for his successor as to whether they should be continued the existing policy or to change the conventional pattern. Had the empire remained united and had the successor continued to the policies of Ashoka, there might have been some interesting result on the future politics of India. As it would be have some impossible for the successor of the Ashokas to have continued his policy, and if they were not conscious for the reason why Dhamma was so important to 3rd century BC in India. So it is a debatable point whether any of the later Mauryas had the fundamental understanding of the Indian conditions, and it appears from his inscription that the Dasarath may have been aware of Ashokan policy and supported it, but probably his youth prevented him to developing in it or the Dhamma policy. So for the considerable amount or the variation of the names in the Mauryan kings list. It is the source, and it would seem that there was a general tendency for male relatives and member of the royal family was a general tendency for uh, relatives and the members of the royal family either to claim the throne or to proclaim themselves as a independent ruler in the provinces. So, attempt has been also been made to explain this variation in names as being secondary names or the birudas of the same kings. So, but this is not a convincing explanation. Most of the birudas do not have any connection either semantically or the phonetically with the best known name of the person. In fact, many short region with the 50 years suggest that some of the kings were deposed. On the other hand, much have been written on the Ashokan policy being directed or the directly responsible for the decline of the Mauryan Empire. So this accusation is based on the two main arguments that has historian argued that the first maintained that the revolt of the Pushyamitra was a result of the Brahminical reaction against the pro-Buddhist ideology or the policy of Ashoka and the pro-Jaina policy of his successor. So on the other hand, the second argument holds Ashoka pacifist policies responsible for the undermining the strength of the empire. So the first opinion had been expressed by the Har Prasad Sastri that there is no uncertain terms. The question has been examined in some detail by the Ray Chaudhary in his books. So we shall try to summarize the argument of the both scholars while going through the decline of the Mauryan Empire and uh, also try to interpret the or to examine these I- explanation given by these scholars in our terms. So the Har Prasad Sastri states or maintains that the ban on the animal sacrifices was a direct attack on the Brahmins, since much of their power and prestige lay in the fact that they were alone could perform sacrifices, and thus act as an intermediary between the people and the gods. On the other hand, Ray Chaudhary stated that this ban did not necessarily imply hostility toward the Brahmins, since Brahminical literature itself stresses on the non-violence or the ahimsa, and mentioned the futility of the laying great store on the sacrifices alone. So, in one of the edict, Asoka also specifically state that the no animal are to be sacrificed in the particular places whether the edict had been inscribed. So on the other hand, in the other edicts, the ban is on the killing of the certain animal, even those regarded as edible, and not only on those used in the sacrifices. So a second point on the same subject is the statement that this action was particularly resented by the Brahmins since it was the promulgated by the Sudra king. This point is one of the point that we should note that the Brahman that the Brahman since it was uh, promulgated this idea because there was a Sudra king. So the Sudra origin of the Maurya is mainly based on the statement in that Purana when in speaking of the Nanda dynasty, it is said that all kings succeeding Mahapadmanan will be the Sudra origin. So it is right to state that the Ray Chaudhary point out that this can be only referred to the Nanda king who has succeeded Mahapadmanan because if it is referred to the succeeding dynasties, then even the Sungas or the Kadwas would have been included as a Sudras. And we all know that the Sungas were the Brahman origin and the Kshatriyas origin of the Maurya is stated in the other sources. So another argument that was made by the Shastri is based on the phrase from the minor rock edict at the Brahmagiri, referring to the uh, the gods in Jambu Deep. So he interprets it as a meaning that the Brahman who were regarded as a Bhudevas or the gods on the earth had been exposed by the Asoka as being false gods. So as we have all know that this argument is based on the alternative roots for the ahimsa. So it is generally accepted that this does not refer to the gods mixing on the earth with the people and does not refer to the false gods. So, according to the Shastri, the Dhamma Mahamatras who destroyed the prestige of the Brahman, and the Ray Chaudhary points out that this could be hardly have been since some of them were consulted or the concerned on the especially with the safeguarding the right and welfare of the Brahman in the Mauryan Empire. So the furthermore, we can argue that the Dharma Mahamatras were also concerned with the social welfare generally and covered a much wider field of the work than the in compared to the Brahmins. So it is possible, however, that the Dhamma Mahamatras may have been unpopular with the people in the later years of the Asoka's reign, and this is prevented, if anything, Asoka being in the contact with the public opinion. So, with the gradual increase in their power of the interference, these officials tended to form an order of their own on the line of the Asoka, and with officials' sanction and the right of the entry in everywhere. So since they had the special favor of the king or the Asoka or the any contemporary king, they were no doubt feared by the population and by the appeasement were granted them to many privileges in the society. So their power of the supervision extended over the both in the ordinary householder and also in the royal family. So it can be suggested that the more than that the people more than the mere precautions and propaganda of the dharma, it is possible that those citizens who proclaim themselves as the follower of the dhamma in the loud voices receive preferential treatment compared to those who were practiced in the very quiet ways. So officials, even those with the best of the intention, cannot be expected to act as a superior human, not even in the Dhamma Mahamantras. So we can say that it is likely that in the course of their routine duties, and they assumed great power than the Asoka and had intended or knew it that the creed of these Mahamatra were uh, Dhamma, and in the more distant areas, they were the interpreter of the Dharma or the Dhammas. So this is a situation not unknown to the other culture, and for the church or the Buddhist Christian religion has known it in its priest, and the political system had been known it there in commissionaries. So now the question arises the Danda Samhita that the in the uniformity of the legal procedure and punishment is raised by the Har Prasad Shastri in the support of his argument that the privilege that usually given to the Brahmins regarding the penalties were stopped as a result of these two measures adopted by the King Ashok. So, on the other hand, Ray Chaudhary declined this argument and on the basis of term meaning a uniformity of the law and punishment. So we are in the support of the later view and we have already examined the matter in the detail and try to examine this matter in the very detail that how Mauryan dynasty, the Mauryas declined and how the policy of the Asoka became the responsible for the decline of the Mauryan Empire. So, quotation from the Brahmanical literature can prove that the privilege of the Brahman in the matter of the immunity in the capital punishment. So, we are not so evident as the Shastri would have us to believe. So Asoka's frequent request in his edict for the due respect toward Brahmanism and the Shramanas hardly point to the being anti-Brahminical in the outward. So Shastri's final argument is even weaker than his previous one, and he maintained that the Asoka was a strong enough to hold his own against the Brahmins, but on his death, a conflict arose between his successor and the Brahmins, which lasted until the assumption of the power by the Pushyamitra Sung, and the later was the expression of the great Brahman revolution. So neither of these arguments are borne out by the Egyptian evidence, as Ray Chaudhary has shown to us. So we know that the from the sources that the one of the sources that the Raj Tarangini, that one at least of Asoka descendant was quite anti-Buddhist and very pro-Brahman. We're talking about the Jaluka. Jaluka is describing as an adherent follower of the Seva, Saivaist ideology. So the idea of being Pushmitra being a violently anti-Buddhist has often been stated, but archaeological evidence shows that the uh, against the this remark. So Buddhist literature laid that the Pushmitra song wishing to gain notoriety decided that even a weak action would be executed provided to made him to well known. When questioning people as to why Ashoka gained fame, he was told that it was due to the Ashoka having built almost 84,000 stupas for the Buddhism. So, whereupon Pushmitra decided that he would gain fame by destroying these 84,000 stupas. So, yet an archaeological study of the stupa at Sanchi proved that that it was enlarged and increased in the present covering during the Sunga period. So the Asoka pillar near it appears to have been willfully destroyed, but this event may have been occurred a very much later date. So it is more than likely that the Asokvadana legend is a Buddhist version of the Pushmitra's attack on the Mauryas and reflect that the fact that with the declining influence of the uh, Buddhism at the imperial court, Buddhist monuments and institutions would naturally receive less royal attention. That's why uh, Buddhists got uh, few attention in the society. And so, moreover, over the sources itself in this stance being Buddhist, it would be naturally exaggerate the bitterness of the anti-Buddhist idea. On the other hand, since the Mauryan Empire had shrunk considerably and the king of the later period were hardly in the position of defend themselves, so it did not need a revolution to depose Brihadrat, or the last ruler of the Mauryan Empire. So we are told that he was assassinated by the Pushmitra Sung while reviewing the army. This is does not suggest a great revolution. In fact, it points very strongly to place a argument that the organization of the state was by now at such a low establishment, and the subordinate officials were willing to accept anyone who could promise them a more efficient organization. If it had been a great Brahminical revolution, Pushmitra Singh would have or had the assistant of their neighboring kings, as per the example of the descendant of the Subhaga Sen from the northwest frontier. So it is claimed that the proportion of the Buddhism during the Mauryan period distributed the Brahminical social and religious order in the society. Nor was this confined only to the Buddhism, and some aspect of the Ashokan policies, such as a discouragement of the Mangalas and the similar ceremony, must have had the same effect on the society. So, but this disturbance was not part of the magnitude sufficient to weaken the Mauryan state. So it may have been started new trend of thought, but social behavior contributed much as before. The author Ray Chaudhary, on the other hand, has attacked Ashoka on the basis of his having pursued a policy of the non-violence with such vigor and determination that it resulted a completely effete nation from a military point of view, and one that was not therefore able to witness the Greek invasion in India. So he maintained that the Ashokan policy was directly responsible for the rapid disintegration of the Ashokan Empire and after the death of Ashoka. This policy of non-violence, we can say that not only caused the decline of the military, but also led to the lack of the control in the part of the king. So this lack of the control led to the official became oppressive in their region and the provinces, leading to the revolts referred to the Buddhist literature. In short, the pacifist policy of the Asoka rendered to the or more mainly tended to the deorganize the administration of the empire. But this judgment on the Asokan policy is not acceptable if we consider the edicts as a source of the history, or if we examine the uh, this judgment in the light of the edicts. So the unconventional nature of a government of the Ashoka did not lie in his taking to heart to the doctrine of ahimsa or the non-violence. It is lay in the fact that he was personally convinced that a greater degree of non-violence and mutual respect would be to the benefit of the society, and furthermore that his personal conviction was so great that even as a king he did not refrain from the preaching and requesting people to be the part of the this kind of behavior, or to be the part of the his dhamma. So as far as the possible, he determined his administrative policy in accordance with the such principles. So there are two much have been made for the Ashoka pacifism without a detailed examination of what this policy really meant for. So he disliked the killing of animal. This is very simple. That he didn't want to the killing of the animal in there in his empire. So whether the purpose of this disliking the killing of the people and its purpose for the sacrifice or the food. So he continually state that in his edicts that the animal should not be killed, or whether this is not possible at the least kindness to animal should be observed. So however, animals were still killed for the food in the palaces, although the number was considerably reduced in a manner before before the before the announcement of this order. So we have no state proper evidence of his having obtained from his practice altogether, though he stated that he wishes to do so. So he completely not banned the killing of the animals in 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 his empire, but he wishes to do that that if people refrain from the killing of the animal in the Mauryan Empire. So the list of animals that are declared inviolable does not include the chief edible animals. So it would seem that the whether or the whatever is possible, abstain from the eating meat was observed. And but on the whole of the practice, it is still continued in the Mauryan Empire. So had he indeed been so competitive, pacifist as Ray Chaudhary would have been us to believe, so he would surely have abolished the death penalty in the Mauryan Empire, but capital punishment was continuous throughout his empire and throughout his reign. So the only form of the alleviation was introduced in his 27 regional year, when a 3-day respite a 3-day respite was granted to those who were condemned to the death. So Rai Chaudhary or the according to the Ray Chaudhary, maintains that the successor of the Ashoka were brought up on a specific diet to such an extent that they were incapable of standing up to any armed forces, and they had heard more of the Dhamma Ghosh than of the Bheri Ghosh uh, uh, in the empire. So it would appear from the above argument, as I have told, that the Asoka issued an order for the demobilization for the or the of all his army, and they settled down to rule a non-violence and its literal sense. So there is no hint of this in his edicts. So the evidence suggests a steam monarch, even though his reign was saw only a single campaign against the any enemy. So he stated that his attitude was also toward the frontier people, for example, is quite clearly, and the king is willing to forgive those who have not, those who have done the wrong, but only that which can be forgiven is forgiven. Even more precise in his message to the forest tribe, they are warned for the power which he possesses in the spite of his repentance, so that they may cease committing faults and therefore not to be killed. So the same edict, on the other hand, contains further evidence which entirely contradicts Ray Chaudhary argument, and that the Asoka wishes his successor to forswear conquest of the territories. On the other hand, Asoka stated that, or he believes that the no further conquest is necessary, and in which he said that it is illogical enough considering the fact that the Mauryan Empire covered the practically the entire subcontinent, but that if his successor should have to make a conquest in the future, it was to be hoped that they would be merciful wherever possible and deliver the light punishment to the masses or the enemy. So Asoka was in a position of maintain specific policy, or and the that policy of because his frontier was secure and so was the territory within the empire. That's why he created the or the started the Dhamma in his empire. So the only area that we can say that the might have been the troublesome for the Kalinga, and he conquered in the early part of his reign, and the conquest of the South India would not have been done, would not have been too difficult for a task for the Mauryan armies. But there was no need for it because the empire of the Antiochus of the Syria was the only serious rival to the Mauryan Empire, and to have attempted the conquest of the lands beyond the Hindus, and would have been a foolhardy act on the Asokan part, placing its forces in unnecessary danger, campaigning in the desert and the mountain. So, in any case, the friendly relationship between him and Antiochus was on all counts a better relationship than any number of the conquest. So the only people from whom he could be accept trouble were the frontier tribes already referred to. So they may well have harassed his administration or their administrators, and with them he used to great firmness. So the absence of the innumerable conquest does not in the way suggest that the Asoka merely visited retained whether his father and grandfather had conquered before him, so that he himself was filled with the ideas of a conqueror cannot be doubted, as has been pointed out in the strain that this pacifism did not lead him to reinstating the Kalinga as a independent king or the independent state or the province. So, but being a practical ruler, he acted the conquest of Kalinga as a fact of did not raise any moral doubt on the question. Moreover, he did not, or the Asoka did not publicize his confession of remorse over the conquest in Kalinga itself. Uh, He appears to be have been quite convinced that he had the submission of the Greek state of the Eastern Mediterranean, and merely by sending them Dhamma's mission. And what is he more he pointed out the proud of this supposed submission of the Dhamma. So the difference between Asoka and the Samudgupta of the Gupta dynasty uh, in this matter is that Asoka glories in the Dhamma or the conquest through the Dhamma, known as the Dhamma Vijay, and later glories in the Yuddha Vijay, as far as the we talk about the Samudgupta. So similarly, the power of the Asoka over Devnam of Cyclone was considerable, even though Cyclone was never actually uh, queer. So the military conquest of these areas would have altered the relationship between the two countries for the worse, in addition to the creating and told other problem for an administrative failure. So on the next thing that we should note that the military conquests were not to only one of the any value and the greatness of the king that does not lie in a number and quality of such conquest. So it is clear that Asoka was not the naive and extreme pacifist that the some historians have attempted to make him like that. So even the entire generation of the complete pacifism cannot weaken an empire and lead it to the so fast disintegration, integration. So the battles and the wars and the territorial acquisitions are not alone responsible for the creation and destruction of the any empire or the modern empire. So the cause must be sought in the other directions as well as. Furthermore, it has been said that, or stated that the provincial governments were oppressive in the nature, and this is given as a further cause of the decline of the Mauryan. So this statement is based on the two theories and in the Divya, Divya Vada. So regarding the revolt of the people of Takshila against their ministers, and we have already discussed this that one of these stories based on the fabrication, namely that the revolt at the end of the Asoka's reign, when Kunala or the Kunal was the went to the suppress this revolt. so the so the revolt was suppressed by the Asoka during the reign of the Bindusara, is supported by the circumstantial evidence. So thus there is in fact no clear evidence of the having a ministerial oppression during the reign of the Ashok. So it has been suggested that the evidence uh, and on the advice of the Muhammad Taz in the first separate edict is to be ensured against this kind of oppression in the provinces, since the king demand that the officers treat well all persons under their charge and they just be a human and treat a human like a human. So, but the real significance of this edict lies in the fact that it is addressed only to be the Muhammad Raj at Dhauli and Jawgad, and both cities both were the cities of the Kalinga, and not to other officers in the other part of the Mauryan Empire. So it is natural that the Ashok would pay particular attention to the welfare of the people recently conquered, as Kalinga is recently conquered by the Ashoka, so as to secure their loyalty in order to secure their loyalty of the people of the Kalinga. So in addressing these Mahatmas, his tone is imperious and there is not the least hint of the emperor who is not in the control of the administration. On the other hand, one of the another writer has expressed that opinion that there has no considerable pressure on the Mauryan Empire, Mauryan economy under the later Mauryas, or the ruler who became the king of the after the Ashok. So this argument is also based on the two factors. Main one is the unnecessary measure were employed to increase the taxes. As for example, the tax on the actors and prostitutes mentioned in the Arthashastra, and second is the Mauryan Punchmark coin of this period, so evidence the debasement of the coins. So this view is largely the result of the an analysis based on the elected or the selected uh, this analysis or the argument is primarily based on the selected economic evidences without taking into the consideration. So the factor of the time. So we can say that this is the factor of the time or the political and economical factor of the that period. So it was during the we can say that it was during the modern period when for the first time the importance of the taxation is as the primary source of the income was fully appreciated. So this resulted is a tendency to the tax everything that could be possibly fixed and also be taxed. So it is clear from the Arthashastra itself that the tax on the actors and prostitutes and the member of the other such professions was not an emergency measure. And since this tax is a considerable legitimate tax and one as a normal as that received from the cultivators. So in fact, the Arthashastra does mention certainly measures that have might be introduced in the in emergency if kings want to fill his treasury or the king's treasury became empty. So the tax on the actors on the also on the others is not mentioned among these major. So debasement, on the other hand, of the coinage during the Mauryan period did not necessarily mean a pressure on the general economy, owing to the laxity and dwelling of the control during the period of the later Mauryas or the king who became the king of the king who became the king after the Asoka. So it is possible that the debased money began to be circulate, and particularly in the areas which were gradually ceding from the empire and declaring themselves as a independent provinces or the areas or the region. So since the coin have been found largely in the hoards where provenance is often not known. So in areas such as above mentioned, or that the coin may have been punched by the authorities and put into the circulation without the properly uh, checking their quality. Furthermore, such debasement may also indicate that there was an increased demand for the silver in the relation of the other goods, and therefore the silver content in the coins was dropped. And moreover, Didi Kosambi's as Didi Kosambi's argument is based on his own identification of the coins of the Little Mauryas, and this is by no means a certain. So, evidence from the other materials remain does not suggest a pressure on the economy. If anything happened, the picture is that of an expanding economy in the modern society. As far as the we got the archaeological evidences at the Hastinapur and Sisupalgarh, it would appear that there was a considerable material improvement in the culture of the this time. So both from the point of view of the technical advancement and the use of the better quality of the material, this improvement appeared to be have been more equitably distributed than during the earlier Mauryan period. For example, at the earlier level, most of the pottery was a coarse grey ware together with the some deposits of the northern black polished ware. So at the later level of the post-Ashokan Mauryas and the early Sungas, there is evidence of the widely distributed pottery, wheeled thrown and of a fine clay. We find that the very good quality of the pottery during the post-Asokan Mauryas and the early Sungas period. So, comparatively, new element that of the town planning and the house planning become a more regular features in the later period. So there is a distinct improvement in the workmanship of the objects such as beads, rings and the terracottas, also in the other things. So the reign of Asoka was a great advancement to the economy. So the unification of the country under a single efficient administration, the organization and the increase in the communication and peace meant the development of trade as well as the opening of the many new commercial interests in the society. So it is possible that during the period of the extreme political confusion, particularly in the Ganges valleys, they, they, there may have been some hoarding of the money by the merchant and the commercial classes of their region. So this hoarding may well be have led to the disbasement of the pioneer system in the society, but there is no doubt that the economic prosperity that prevailed with the political decline of the Mauryan Empire and the surplus wealth was used by the rising commercial classes to decorate religious buildings. For a brief period, they were now the donors. So the sculpture at the Bharat and Sanchi and the Deccan caves was the expression of the new Burmese classes who donated much money to the religious cause. So it has been said by the one of the another writer that the Pushmitra was a people's revolt against the Mauryan oppression and the rejection of the Mauryan adaptation of the foreign ideas as far as the intents in the Mauryan art. So this argument is based on the idea that the Sung art, largely in the sculpture at the Bharat and Sachi, on the idea that the Sachi is more likely to the uh, earthy and the folk tradition than the Mauryan arts. So clearly, Mauryan art expressed the imperialism or of its emperor quite unashamedly, as can be seen in the Asokan capitals. So whether derived from the foreign sources or not, this unmistakable character of the Mauryan art would have been remained nevertheless. So the character of the Sunga art changes from the time to time because it serves a different purpose and its donor came from the different social classes. So the Asoka columns are not to be uh, intimately connected with the Buddhism as a religion, as are the railing and the gateway of the Bharot and Sachis to suggest. So the arts conforms more to the folk tradition because Buddhism itself incorporated large element of the popular cults and because the donor of these arts, many of whom have been artisans, were culturally more in the mainstream of the folk literature or the folk tradition. So the idea of the popular revolt is further elaborated on the idea of the basis of the Asokas having banned the Samajas, etc. So it is possible that the Asoka's ban on the festive meetings and his discouragement of the eating meat may have uh, filled the anger among the population, though it is still open to question whether these prohibitions were strictly enforced uh, during the Asokan period or in the later period. So in his later year, so as in the later year, we have noticed a general tendency that the toward the authoritarianism, which may have been resulted the measures that have been assumed that the Asokan policy in all detail were continued by the later Mauryas. So, nevertheless, it is unlikely that there was a sufficient national consciousness among the different among the peoples of the Mauryan Empire to rise up in the support of the Quds Mitrasung against the Mauryan oppressions, even if this kind of thing is existed in the society or in the period of the later Mauryan kings. On the one of the another argument that has been used on the occasion of the favor of the idea of a revolt against the Maurya is that that land tax under the Mauryas is described as being one quarter, and this high taxation is too heavy as a burden on the cultivators. So, if the taxes was indeed uniformly one quarters, there might be some truth in the it's causing rural discontent or the discontent among the rural society. So, but as we have um, already discussed that the taxes varied from the region to region and according to the fertility of the soil and the availability of the water in that region. So the figure of the one quarter stated by the Megasthenes probably referred only to the extreme tribal or the extreme fertile and well watered region around Patliputra with which the Greek visitors would have been the most familiar during their visit. So that one quarter of the produce was not the usual amount collected from the cultivators seems fairly clearly from the Arthashastra, where it is suggested in the period of the emergency, the king may increase his demand to one third or one quarter. So obviously, therefore one quarter was regarded as a high tax, and it is unlikely that the Mauryan rulers would have been insisted on such high taxation in normal condition. If that were so, then the Asoka injunctions to the Rajukas to be just and fair in their judgment would be sheer hypocrisy. So the decline of the Mauryan Empire cannot be satisfactorily explained by the quoting military inactivities, Brahman resentment, and the popular uprisings or the economic pressure. The causes were far from more fundamental and including a much wider perspective of the moral period, including the moral life, than any of these mentioned thing. So, furthermore, the decline of the other empire and the period of the political expansion may also be explained in part of by these same reason. So, the organization of the administration and the conception of the state or the nation were of the great significance in the cause of the in the causes of the decline of the Mauryan Empire. So, Mauryan, on the other hand, Mauryan bureaucracy, had it been of the different nature, might still have saved the situation and prevented such a uh, complete disintegration of the empire. The administration, as we have already discussed, was an extremely centralized in the character with the higher functions uh, as far as the possible under the direct control of the ruler. So this is itself necessitated a king of the considerable personal ability. In such cases, the weakening of the central control leading to the uh, uh, automatically to a weakening of the administration of the provinces or the other part of the empire. So, we can say that with the death of the Ashok and the uneven quality of his successor, there was a weakening at the center. So, particularly after the division of the empire. So, the breaking away of the provinces was at this point almost inevitable. Since the official of the administration owed their loyalty to the king and not to the state, so they became the personal employee of the king, particularly as the king had such overwhelming power of the personal selections. This meant that a change of the king could result in the change of the officials, at least of the more senior and responsible ones. So this would be especially detrimental to a country during a period where there was a rapid succession of the kings, as was the case in the Mauryan India or the Mauryan Empire soon after the death of the Ashoka. If the administration, on the other hand, contemporary France, since World War II, had owed its loyalty to the government in the power. So France, as a political unit, might have well have been on the way to disintegrate by now. Even with this fact that the changing royalties to the Mauryan could have employed a system to ensure their contribution of well-trained bureaucracy, which could be maintain the peace of the administration though many political upheavals. So this was the comparative system of the examination, which was used to such effect in the later century by the British administration in India. So it is curious that although the Arthashastra goes into such considerable detail regarding the administration of the kingdom, yet now wherein there is a indication of how the subordinate administration were recruited. So there is certainly no evidence whatsoever of any competitive system. We are told that the high officials were selected on the personal choice of the king. So it is to be presumed that this system of the personal selection continued in the later uh, rulers or the later period. This strengthened the force of the social kinship, since there would be a natural tendency of the officer to select subordinate from the member of their own social group or the family or the friends. So this would in turn create either group loyalties or the group among towards the new king. So should one officials have to be dismissed for the loyalty to the new king, possibility an entire section of the administration would have been to be changed. So no doubt the later Mauryan king must have frequently faced this situation within a weak king at the center. It was not difficult for a local ruler or the prince or the person to directly loyalty toward himself instead of the king. So it is not to be wondered that the Megasthenes described that the administrator as a forming two of the seven classes of the society. So they must certainly have been a privileged group. The senior officers gained as a tremendous social prestige owing to fact that they are being personally selected by the kings, and the juniors would form a closed community with the other member of the bureaucracy. So together with the social prestige, it is apparent that from the scale of the pay listed in the Arthashastra that they would have economically well provided for. So because of the overwhelming power of the king and the complete absence from the any advisory institutions representative of the public opinion, it was natural that he would have to maintain his contact with the public opinion through various means method, including with the another obvious means and methods which were not always ideal and which could at the time react unfavorably against the king. So the Mauryan polity used with the sanction of the Kautilya system for this purpose, not only were the subordinate officials such as the Gopas actively employed in the ferreting our information of every kind in addition to their other duties. So, but at the same time, an extremely complex system of spies were also employed in this empire. So the use of the reporters and agents is admitted by the Asoka in his edicts, where he stated that they have a considerable priority of the access to the him. So apart from the lack of a representative institution, there was in addition no distinction between the executive and the judiciary of the function of the government. The only check which the king would impose consisted either of the Mahamatas in their role of the royal inspector or else to spies and the reporters of the empire. So the efficiency of the system again, they will mainly depended very much on the personal ability of the ruler of the period. A wise king could use these officers with the uh, in a great manner, but to also to the uh, control the public opinion if he need to be turned uh, into this or the turn public uh, into the support of the his decisions. So equally, in incapable king could also use these officers either for a purpose of operation or to they can also use them to in a no good purpose. So efficiency at the administration of Asoka was during his lifetime, and it was suited only to a strong and vigilant king, and during vigilant king and could not stand up to the corruption which is inevitably sets in the under weak and indifferent rulers. So the machinery of the Mauryan administration policy or the Mauryan administrative policy was so centralized that an able ruler could use it with the both to his own advantage and that of the people, or to the some degree it could be become harmful to the both under a weak ruler who would lose its central control and allow forces of a decay to disintegrate and break it. So, if any political system, the type of administration, and the conception of the state, if such a notion exists at all, are interrelated factors. So, the main necessity for the insisting upon from the concession of the state lies in the fact that that it became an idea about the king, the government, and the social order. So, it is an entity to which every citizen owes his loyalty irrespective of the other barriers and differences between him and his fellow citizens. So the state is then uh, supreme body and the demands employees loyalty. And once the idea of the state becomes natural and clear that the thinking of the people and the nation consciousness emerged. So although in the modern period republics existed, whether the conception of the state was hinted at and even on the occasion defined in a general way, nevertheless the occupation nevertheless, the conception of the nation was not in the existence in the Mauryan India. So we can say that on the other hand, this Arthashastra embodies the Indian conception of the state and it is to say that the uh, on the other hand, the Machiavelli principally embodied the European conception of the state, and with the development of the political ideas in India, the loyalty which is most other culture is given to the state was given to the social order. So as long as the social order is structure or the social structure is remain intact, the idea of the overall state failed to draw either recognition or the support. So this was the one of the reason why imperial structure could not hope to be survive for the long in India, and the Indian social order changed by the slow degree. So the we can there is another point that the absence of the national unity in the modern India can be observed from the other factor as well. So politically, the idea of Indian unity was not existence in the society, and this is clear from the fact that even the resistance against the Greeks, the hated militia was not an organized one. So it was resistance offered by the local rulers who were afraid of the losing their newly acquired territories. So that's why we say that the idea of the nation was not uh, prevalent in the society at the modern during the Mauryan rule. So it is significant that when the Porus was fighting Alexander, or or when he was paying tribute to the Antiochus, they were doing so isolated ruler in the northwest of the India. So they had no support from the Patliputra, nor or they have even mentioned in the any Indian sources as uh, offering support to the any king. So or the stand for the resistance against the Greek rulers. So even the heroic Porus, who enemy thought he was won the admiration of the Greeks, is left unrecorded in the Indian sources. So since there was no fundamental policy and also the political unity among the people of the Mauryan Empire on the basis of the state, on the basis of the nation, and this political disintegration was almost inevitable. So these are the fact that the uh, that helped to the decline of the Mauryan Empire during the uh, 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 Mauryan Empire. Uh, it also include the uh, weak administration and weak rulers and other things that helps to the into the decline of the Mauryan Empire. So, if we study the Indian history, ancient Indian history, and many historians suggest that the pattern of the Magad, though the centuries have been valid for the entire subcontinent. So this approach has resulted in analysis on which also on which occasion have failed to evaluate the particular condition in areas for removed. So the fact that the cause of the decline, if we conclude this, that the cause of the decline of the Mauryas must in the large part be attributed to be a top-heavy administration where authority was entirely in the hands of the few person and the and an absence of the any national feeling or the feeling of the any idea of the nation. These and other facts may have not been immediately apparent in the Magad itself, but are clearly in the evidence when the perspective is brought into the include the entire Mauryan Empire, and these helps into the decline of the Mauryan Empire. So this is all for the today's lecture, and we in this lecture as we go through the some sources and the writing of the Indian authors who work on the topic of the decline of the Mauryan Empire or the Mauryan Empire. They suggested that all these reasons, as I have already told, that all these reason became the causes, reason for the decline of the Mauryan Empire in this manner. And uh, this is all for the today's lecture. Thank you.